All right. Good evening, morning, evening, afternoon, night, wherever it might be for you. Welcome, and I'm excited to see you guys today. We have some exciting news that Jarvis tried to ruin for us, so hopefully you didn't read the comments of the last episode of news, because we're going to be covering those probably a little bit in detail today. And this has been something that's kind of been going on for like the last 3 months, since January, I think. I'll give some people a little bit of time to join. I am slightly early on my late time. I think 9:15 works just best for me. 9:15 is like when I can make it. I'm going to aim for 9, but it will probably be 9:15 most of the time. All right. So, like I've always said, feel free to jump on the chat if you have a question, as well as Discord if you guys have questions and want to ask them. I kind of feel like this is also partly time that I can get to reach out and interact with you guys. So, if you have just random off the topic questions, feel free to ask those towards the end as we're winding down. That way, we have a little bit more time to just discuss, and people that are here for the news can get the news first before they jump off. If you have any questions or comments or conversations about the news that we're covering, feel free to pipe up and say something about that, and I will respond. All right. So before we jump into the news, it is 9:15. I did want to just tell you guys tomorrow I am releasing the first episode of my new class that I'm releasing. So I'm releasing what will turn out to be one lesson every single week for the next 6 weeks. And then I'm going to take a couple week break, and then I will release the next lesson. So the two lessons I've done at this point are an introduction to containers and an introduction to Kubernetes. Now, these are very basic and probably not for most of my followers. Most of my followers, I think, like the very technical that I generally cover. But this is for some of those people that might not be up to doing those very technical. So I thought that if I started to do a class, I really should start from the beginning and work all the way up to the very technical ones. So I'm releasing those. So if you know anybody that's just getting into containers or Kubernetes, those will be hopefully a really great resource for them. And while they'll just be here on YouTube, I would like to, once I collect several of them, actually, I have lesson plans and everything for them that I'll be posting on some website like Teachable. So if that's something you're interested, leave me a comment or whatnot. All right, let's get into the news. So, as you all probably know, I've been itching to talk about Monday right after I did my last one. Last week, I called AWS out and said that I wasn't going to cover any more AWS news until they finally released their Elasticsearch, open source Elasticsearch. And just to make a fool of me, the day after, the following day, on Monday, they released OpenSearch. Let's go ahead and take a look at that. So this is their release, and they released the OpenSearch is what it's called. Here is the repository, so OpenSearch, and there's OpenSearch. There's also Open Dashboard. So if you're looking for the actual open source version of this, you can find it here. Now, what I think that this is possibly going to do is it might possibly very much hurt Elasticsearch. So you can see it's derived from Elasticsearch 7.10, which is the last major release of the open source version of Elasticsearch before they went to a more proprietary one. And I think that this actually is really good for Elasticsearch, but it's hard for the open source community. A lot of times, open source says that the cloud is killing it, which I don't actually sell to, because with the advent of the cloud, actually, there's more open source projects today than there ever has been in the past. and open source projects for doing a lot. It's kind of changed how open source has gone. But this is what you can do with an open source project. So if you initially, this would be a good warning for just about any company. If you initially release as an open source project, anybody can fork and maintain a separate branch. And so it really threatens you if you want to take it from being open source to a closed source project, which is what Elasticsearch did. And I honestly think that it's kind of a rocky time for Elasticsearch. I don't know where they move on from here, because if they try to, I don't know where they move on, but I will be continuing to cover this because I'm interested to see how this develops further, because this is the first major project that has gone this way. Nobody forked MongoDB that I know of. So I'm really interested to see how this develops. Anyways, you can check it out. It has OpenSearch, Open Dashboards, if you're interested in the Apache 2 version of Elasticsearch. I'd be interested to hear your guys' thoughts on it, what you guys think. And yeah, so sorry about the ads on here. I saw this, and a researcher developed a working exploit for a 0-day remote code execution. What I disliked about this is, if you guys really are trying to make the internet a safer place, don't drop your exploit on GitHub and tweet it out if it's a 0-day. Now, I think that if the company is ignoring you and not admitting to it, then you have a fair reason to do this. The fact is, they had patched it, but the patch isn't actually released in the mainstream stable branch. So a lot of people are still vulnerable to this. So I don't think that this is a very responsible way of doing it. They not only acknowledged it was a problem, but they also patched it, which I think is the responsible thing to do. You just shouldn't go out and put the actual code that would exploit this out there at that point. But that's just mine. I'd love to hear what you guys think on that type of subject. All right, we're going to a lot of security. Sorry, we're going to get over this. There was another one in Cryo. I wanted to talk to you guys about this CVE 2021-2029-1, and this is one that affects Cryo and Podman. So if you're not familiar, this is all about container runtimes. As far as I read through this, the containerd or Docker is not affected, or not affected is the same. But this is kind of a new, this CVE kind of has a new meaning. It's almost a DDoS with a supply chain attack. So why I say that is, it's not a distributed denial of service. But what happens is that if they get the malicious package into your repository, or you pull it, it actually brings your node down. So the only way to recover your node is to then restart it and redo it, rejoin it to a cluster. So basically, if your system was to pull this malicious node, it would brick your system, your Kubernetes system. Hopefully you're not pulling images on your control plane. That would protect your control plane, but this could be a problem for your nodes. And I don't think, I don't think a lot of people expect things like this. So this is, again, another supply chain type. And this is why it's important when you're configuring your Kubernetes clusters to, Sergio, I will get to your question in just a second. I think that's a very valid question, and we will jump onto that. I kind of missed it, but I've got it now. And as soon as I'm done with this. So anyways, the CVE, it's kind of a supply chain, and this is why it's so important that you make sure you have restrictions on where you're allowed to pull from, what repositories, as well as ensure that those repositories are owned by people that you trust, and that the supply chain from code to your server is protected and signed with certificates. Huge deal. I need to make a video on that specific. So, Sergio, and I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, and I apologize if I don't. Please correct me. I'd like to pronounce it correctly. The difference between OpenSearch and the Open Distro is not really anything. So let's go ahead and open the Open Distro. So this is the Open distro. We will open in a new tab over here. And the Open distro for Elastic is all around the environment. So basically, let's go ahead and pull up the GitHub. It's all about the tools and environment. So this is like the Kibana reports and the SQL and the trace analysis. This is stuff that AWS did like a year ago when they got in their first kind of skirmish with Elasticsearch, which basically made some of the things available as Apache 2. The OpenSearch is kind of a new project, a new structure created to govern this. So they are making it completely open source and controlled by the community, which I really appreciate of AWS. I actually thought AWS was going to take leadership role in it, and they are taking a leadership role in it. But they are leaving it up to the community with issues as well as ways to get involved in it. Now, I haven't gotten involved in it, but they're taking contributions from the community and looking at getting the community more involved in it. I don't know if they're going to give this to something like the CNCF or the Apache Foundation. I think that would actually be a really good move on their part to kind of divest that corporate control over it. But we'll keep an eye out on it and see what it is. Now, why they didn't do it in the Open distro for Elastic here in this repository, I honestly am not quite sure at this point. This is a bunch of tools and ecosystems around the OpenSearch thing, and maybe they're planning on merging those two. At this point, I don't know. This was just the original one, but it didn't actually contain Elasticsearch itself. This was the open distribution of Elasticsearch. So, but yeah, that's as far as I know. I hope that answered your question well enough. All right, let's move on. So yes, anyways, if you're running in Cryo or Podman, there are patches out for it, but more importantly, you wouldn't be vulnerable if you make sure you don't have a supply chain attack in the first place. Along with security, I found this kind of interesting. I would have expected the NSA to be doing this, not the FBI. But this seems to allude that the FBI was doing it. And now maybe it was the FBI with the NSA. Not that the FBI couldn't do it. It just seemed not as... Anyways, the FBI took it upon themselves to actually basically... They got a warrant to hack servers of the Exchange servers that were vulnerable that hadn't patched yet and actually patched their machines for them. So I thought that was kind of an interesting thing that the FBI took it upon themselves to ensure that your machines weren't vulnerable for you. It was something like 96% had already been patched, but the FBI went ahead and patched the rest themselves. It was interesting because I didn't realize a warrant could be so wide sweeping like that. Anyways, I put this in a link in the description if you want to see the information from the Department of Defense or Department of Justice. That's how good I am at American politics. Don't tell anybody that's where I live. Anyways, yeah, the Department of Justice. So go ahead and read that. All right. VMware had two things, but I only have the project here. VMware actually is getting rolled out of Dell, which I find is interesting. VMware is probably the biggest reason to Dell is still a company, I think. Maybe not. Anyways, they have an open source project, and it released its initial release. So this has been out for a while, but it is now version 1.0. If you don't know what this is, it's built on top of Open vSwitch. If you don't know what Open vSwitch is, it's an open virtualized switch. I guess that's kind of self-evident in Open vSwitch. I'll throw a link to Open vSwitch in the description as well if you want to read up on what that is. But basically, it's a networking solution that is intended to be Kubernetes native and really competes at giving you some security inside your networking of Kubernetes itself. So at this point, we're kind of on to all of the projects, as you can see. And yeah, this is something VMware. It's an open source project under the the Apache 2 license. Yep. Don't know my... Next, this is an awesome project. Netflix released consoleme. If you don't know what it is, consoleme is a command line. It's written in Python, which I can't agree with. I don't like Python a whole lot. I just lost 5 subscribers for that. consoleme is a tool that lets you manage AWS IAM permissions. If you've ever managed IAM permissions, you can know how difficult it is. Even just standing up something like an EKS cluster can be slightly painful without a lot of help. If you've actually tried to do it, I challenge you, try to go and create an EKS cluster without using any web resources. Create an EKS cluster with not a root user, so not the user, your user. Create a new user and give them just the permissions they need to create a cluster. You can't give them everything. That's cheating. Create just a Kubernetes cluster or be able to create an EKS cluster. It's actually quite challenging. I actually have done this task. Maybe I'll make a video on it. It's a fun little challenge. But consoleme looks to make it much easier to manage and log into the AWS console. And yeah, an AMI self-service wizard. So anyways, check it out if you guys use AWS, which a lot of us do. It might be worth checking out. I found this interesting. I really love GitHub Actions, and the CLI 1.9 was just released, and this gives you access to GitHub Actions from your terminal. So if you're a fan of CLIs, which a lot of us Linux people are, you're going to be looking at loving this tool. I love the GitHub CLI. It's very powerful, and now it's giving you a little bit more use for your GitHub Actions, and so you should check it out. And you can, you can check on your jobs and whatnot. So I thought it was cool. I think I have it in here twice. Production value. All right. Here is a cool thing that is now cloud native. It's been accepted in cloud native, the Ambassador API gateway. If you guys don't know what the cloud native is, I think it's a little over abused, but it's basically Apache around Kubernetes. It's what Google set up as I can't think of the words now, but it's to manage the open source projects around Kubernetes. That's the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, so the CNCF. A lot of people just say Cloud Native or CNCF. Anyways, so here's a new ingress, or not really new. I think it's on version... What version? I don't know what version this is on. Well, I have no idea. We'll find out the version. Anyways, you should check it out if you're looking at ingress controllers. Terraform 15 is out in general availability. I know a lot of people use Terraform, so I try to make sure to let the release of Terraform, and it's available to download. So if you're using Terraform, Terraform 15, I think the big deal is I think their next goal is a 1.0 release. So hopefully this means the Terraform config changes won't be so drastic in the future anymore. So go ahead and check it out. Terraform 15. So we're really only one more release. So 3 more months? I think it's every 3 months that they release a Terraform update. So the next Terraform release should be 1.0. I will cover it in more detail for its birthday. It's like its first birthday, I guess. Yeah. Reproxy is something I found. I've never actually used it. I thought it was cool. It's mostly written in Go, but has a lot of HTML. It is basically, I guess, a simple Nginx reverse proxy. So if you do a lot of reverse proxy and want to check something out that's simple and has a lot of support for a lot of things, go check this out. And it's made by 10 awesome people. And I just wanted to give it a shout out because I found it. So yeah. All right, PD Actions. I found this because I've been doing a decent amount of stuff with GitHub Actions and just wanted to release it because or not release it. I haven't done any work on it. I just wanted to share it with you guys because I found it quite interesting because it's basically designed for GitHub Actions for continuous vulnerability scanning of your stuff using GitHub Actions. It seems more like an experiment project, but it's actually a pretty interesting concept. And if you've been thinking about making a GitHub action, I suggest you look at this and see what they've done because it's actually pretty easy or pretty interesting. It's easy to use is what I meant to say. But yeah, it also breaks down how their workflow does. How their workflow works, and it's actually quite interesting what they've done here. But yeah, see, it performs a bunch of stuff like port scanning and all that type of stuff. So yeah, if you're using GitHub Actions, this is definitely something to check out. All right, so I know that we talked about OpenSearch, so the one last thing that I wanted to talk about is there is a Rust search project, and it is fantastic. I call it rleeased. I don't really know if that's how to pronounce it, but rleeased is a Rust-based project here. You can see rleeased right here. So, and it basically does things like autocorrect and some things like that. So you can use it to start typing your search and to autofill the rest of the search. And so if that's something that you're looking at needing to do, rleeased looks to be like a really awesome option for that. I know that's something you could also use Elasticsearch for, but Elasticsearch is written in Java, and besides like half of the developers, because I think that's how many Java developers there are, who else likes Java? Pretty much all of them. So I won't say anything bad about Java. I actually wrote a lot of Java. I get to complain about Java because I've supported Java infrastructure. So I think I earned my merit badge of complaining about Java. But I complain about most languages except for Rust. I don't complain about Rust. Anyways, that being said, I really do think it's a cool project and just wanted to bring it up as an alternative to OpenSearch or Elasticsearch. As that is it. All right. Do you guys have any questions for me? Thank you guys for joining me. I hope that you enjoy these little bits of news and open source projects that I find. And thanks for coming and hanging out. Feel free to, towards the end of these, ask some questions or ask them throughout it. And if they're not pertinent to exactly what we're talking about, I will try to come back at the end of the show and we can discuss them. I wanted to do this partially, this live setup, just so that we could have a little bit of time to hang out and go over the things that I found interesting that week. That being said, if you find something interesting, want it to be a part of the show, make sure to message me either on Discord or on Twitter, and I will make sure to add it. And if you're part of an open source project, if you've committed code to it and want it to show up on here, please let me know. I would love to show off some of the work that this community is doing in the open source community, and that would actually be super exciting. So if you're doing something in the open source, let me know, send me your commits, send me the project, and yeah, I'll make sure to give it a little talk. That being said, I'm going to get going. Thank you guys for joining me tonight. I know I have a very small community, but I think I have one of the best communities. All of you guys are pretty fantastic, and I absolutely love hosting these for you guys. And I look forward to seeing you guys next week.